Tell the Cortez and the rest of the fleet to rendezvous at Deep Space Nine. An example of a diverse character done right, and probably the best example ever, is Captain Benjamin Sisko, played by Avery Brooks in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Hey, all. Before I jump in and give this reflection slash retrospective on one of my favorite characters of all time from one of my favorite TV shows of all time, I have a request from this side of the camera. Please consider smashing that like button, and also please consider subscribing to the channel. This is Star Trek content, so I suspect the algorithm will bring a lot of new people here. And if this is your first time here, once again, please like this video and please subscribe to the channel. All of that helps out. It helps out this video, it helps out the channel, and it helps me out. So now on to our feature presentation. The Sisko has returned to us. He arrives with questions. There are always questions. So, in my opinion, Captain Benjamin Sisko, played by Avery Brooks on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, was one of the best diverse characters ever on TV or in cinema. And I'm going to talk about that in this video. So where did this video come from? Well, we are in the era of reimagining characters, and we are in the era of replacing characters with new images, with different colors and different genders. And oftentimes today, what's happening is the original character or the original concept is being completely moved aside for something else or for someone else. So I got to thinking and I said, well, what's an example of writers and producers and an actor or an actress? What are examples, or what's an example of someone who has done this right? And I instantly had the light bulb moment. Oh, it was Captain Ben Sisko, played by Avery Brooks. That was the perfect portrayal of a diverse character. And in terms of the concept, in terms of the story world, how the character was grown over the time that we saw him, I thought that this would be a stellar example. Now, on my channel, I've created content on Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings being made black. Of course, the Netflix thing with Cleopatra being made sub-Saharan African, that was controversial. Right now, we're seeing Snow White no longer being Snow White, even though the origins of the character were that. And in the MCU, in Marvel Disney, we've seen a lot of characters just remade and replaced, most notably by female counterparts. And let me say, there's nothing wrong with having female protagonists. There have been many over the years, but it's the supplanting and it's the complete doing away with those male characters that I think that's given a lot of people a lot of heartburn. So with that, I'm going to talk about Captain Benjamin Sisko, played by Avery Brooks from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I'm going to talk about, for me, what made that character so magical and that show so magical, and why I think that was a perfect example of how to create and portray a diverse character. You desire to end the game. You seek to shed your corporeal existence. That cannot be allowed. So I grew up loving science fiction. I grew up with the original Star Wars trilogy, had the toys. I anxiously awaited each sequel to the first movie. And I also grew up with a love for Star Trek. I grew up watching reruns of the original series on television, and I have memories of going to see Star Trek 2 and its successors at the movie theater and taking an interest in what happened to those characters. I was too young when the original movie um, debuted at the movie theater, but I watched it uh, years later, when I could comprehend what they were trying to do and what was going on. My favorite will always be Star Trek 2. Well, Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 3. And then, well, Star Trek 4 was really good. And also Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. But what I'm trying to say is that I grew up with Star Trek. And then as I progressed into middle school and to high school, Star Trek The Next Generation was on TV, and we watched that pretty regularly on Friday nights. Didn't watch the Next Generation movies as much as I watched the original Cruise movies. But then around the mid 1990s, around 1993, they started Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Now, I'm going to give a disclaimer here. I didn't get hooked on Star Trek Deep Space Nine right away. It wasn't until I went away to my HBCU, Johnson C. Smith University. It wasn't until then that I started watching it and that I really, really started to fall in love with it. And one of the main things that caused me to fall in love with Star Trek Deep Space Nine was the main character, Commander and then Captain Benjamin Sisko, played by Avery Brooks. So there is something, as I was thinking about this video, there is something to be said about being able to imagine yourself as a character and seeing yourself on the screen or on TV. But I think the question lies in how that character is put there and whether or not that character is there to be their own character or they're there to replace or reimagine another character. And by the time I finished this video, I hope that I would have convinced you that Captain Sisko was not there to replace Captain Kirk or Captain Picard. He was there to be his own captain and his own character. The game must continue. You are the Sisko. We do not agree. We find your reasoning flawed, insufficient. As I'm looking at my JCSU and my Michigan flag in the background there, I am remembering one of my classmates at the University of Michigan during my graduate studies calling me the emissary because I communicated to him how much I loved the show and this character. So shout out to Gary Jenkins. But one of the things that made Captain Sisko great and memorable was the actor. I was going to say character, was the actor who portrayed him, and that actor was the great Avery Brooks. I did a quick search. I did some quick research on Avery Brooks before shooting this, and Avery Brooks was from the Midwest. He is from the Midwest. He's still here with us, and I believe it's Evansville, Indiana. And he was a well-trained actor. He grew up around music and theater, and that influenced the rest of his life. His start influenced the rest of his life. So he was at that time when the show aired, he was probably in his 40s, mid 40s, late 40s, early 50s. Uh, he stands about 6'1", but he had a baritone on during my research looking him up. He had a baritone voice. He had a very, very strong and commanding, authoritative voice. And when you watch the show and you watch him deliver the lines and act out the scenes, one of the things that hits you and that you notice throughout his performances is his voice. So that was great, and just the way that he conveyed the emotions of losing. Well, I'm going to talk about this later, but losing his wife Jennifer and communicating the love for his son Jake, and the way that he commanded the Defiant when he was on the Defiant, or standing up to Wayun or Gul Dukat. He was a very, very strong actor in terms of presence and portrayal. So that contributed to making the character great. You are the Sisko. The Sisko is belligerent, aggressive, adversarial. Now, in my research for this video, I read that Avery Brooks beat out 100 other actors of varying races and ethnic groups. So that tells me that this character originally wasn't intended to be Black, much the same way the Ripley character from the original Alien movies, that character wasn't initially intended to be a woman. So things just kind of came together, and he seemed to have outcompeted the other actors auditioning for that role. So I thought that was interesting. He wasn't intended to be a Black male captain on this series, and that's different from shoehorning in certain groups just for the sake of diversity. And I want to say once again that that tells me that he was not put in that role, and that role is not created to replace Captain Kirk or Captain Picard. So I talked about Avery Brooks. So in terms of the Ben Sisko character, one of the other things that made him great, and one of the other things that made that character great, in addition to Avery Brooks' portrayal of the character, was the story arc and the complexities that they gave the character. I'm thinking about Rick Berman and Ira. Let me look them up. So it was Rick Berman who was the creator, along with Michael Piller, and the screenwriter was Ira Stephen Bear. I've watched several documentaries and interviews with Mr. Bear, which is why I thought of his name, but I also thought of Rick Berman because you see their names at the end, in the end credits. Anyway, so it was the story arc and the journey that they gave us for Ben Sisko. Well, actually, they gave it to him and we watched it, but he was a widower. His wife died aboard the USS Saratoga when they were in battle with the Borg. When Jean-Luc Picard was transformed into Locutus, he lost his wife. I think it was the Battle of Wolf 59, Wolf 159. Let me look it up. So it was Wolf 359. Maybe I should have done some more research before starting this video. Anyway, but he was a widower. He lost his wife in the Battle of Wolf 359 when the Starfleet was engaging with the Borg. Captain Picard was temporarily transformed into Locutus, and that was a very, very sad opening to the show. He lost his wife, Jennifer, who was portrayed by the very, very lovely Felicia Bell. And she made appearances in the show throughout the series in numerous creative ways. But he was a widower. He was a single father raising a son, which I think are images we could use today. And even though the family was broken up due to tragedy, I think that throughout that series, with not just the Siskos, they show the importance of the nuclear family and of a nuclear family. He was a commander slash captain. Well, he eventually became captain of the Defiant and of the space station, Deep Space Nine. And also, what was unique about Deep Space Nine was the spirituality, the Bajoran religion, the prophets, and the fact that Captain Sisko was named the emissary to the prophets by the prophets of the wormhole. So he turned into a spiritual figure in the show, which he initially didn't want to be and didn't want to do in much the same way. In much the same way that he did not want to become the commander of Deep Space Nine. And over the course of those 7 seasons, we saw him and his son go through their father-son things. We saw Jake grow up. We saw him fall in love with another woman, Cassidy Yates, played by Penny Johnson. We saw the war with the Dominion. We saw interactions with the prophets of the Celestial Temple, the wormhole, and we saw him start to embrace his role as the emissary to the prophets. And yeah, so if you were watching that show, you saw his journey, and maybe if you were like me, you started to grow an affinity for the character and who he was becoming, and you thought the ending of the series was kind of somber as well. We have every right. That is a corporeal matter. Corporeal matters don't concern us. Captain Sisko was also a balanced man. He enjoyed baseball. He cooked. He was a friend. Jadzia Dax, one of her predecessors, Curzon Dax, Curzon went way back with Ben. So there were just several layers to the character, and you saw him as the captain and as the commander. You saw him at times have to be very tender and sensitive, and then you saw him interact with Gul Dukat and Wayun and the Vortas from the Gamma Quadrant. You saw him be really, really hard at times. So we saw an entire spectrum. We saw an entire range for Ben Sisko and for Avery Brooks. Avery Brooks portrayed an entire range for us through that character. We are of Bajor. But what of the Sisko? He is intrusive. He tries to control the game. Now, I could go on and on and on about the layers to the character and how the character developed and the many roles he played. Diplomat. He also became a husband. Again, he remarried. He married Cassidy Yates, and I think she got pregnant towards the end of the series, and Jake had a young sibling, or was going to have a young sibling. But one of the more magical parts of the show was Ben's interactions with the prophets of the Celestial Temple, or the wormhole aliens. And for me, that was unique, and I had never seen anything like that before. And so I'm going to keep hammering away at this. the Captain Sisko character was not designed to replace Captain Kirk or Captain Picard. He was designed to be his own character on his own unique journey. So those scenes with the prophets, even when I watch them now, over 20 years later, they're magical. There's this dreamlike state that they created. There's like this yellowish hue over the screen. Those of you who are familiar with cinematography, and you could tell me if you know how they did that, you could leave that in the comment section below. But imagine a dreamlike state. Oftentimes when Captain Sisko was in there, you could hear his heart beating. Okay. And the prophets, what was cool is they took the appearance of people that Captain Sisko knew, whether they were the good guys on Deep Space Nine or whether they were not the bad guys like the Cardassians or the Vorta or the Founders. They took those images and they spoke to him kind of like children, kind of like they didn't understand him, why he was there and what he was doing. And they spoke to him with a naiveness, even though they were more powerful beings. And one of the recurring themes was he had a corporeal existence, and that time was non-linear. That was one of the coolest things about that show and about his interactions with the prophets. And that's that they were living different existences and they didn't understand his. They understood that he was important to them, but they didn't understand existences that were corporeal and linear. They didn't live in linear time. But that was one of my favorite parts of the character and of the show as well. His interactions with the prophets of the Celestial Temple. And my hat goes off to him for acting those scenes out, and also to the other cast members who played those roles as the prophets as well. So yeah, that was unique, and that was cool about the character and the show. A penance must be exacted. It is agreed. The Sisko is of Bajor, but he will find no rest there. My notes here mention his evolution, and I think I've already covered that. So I don't want to make this video too long, but that was one of the character was a three-dimensional character with faults, with strong attributes and with weak attributes. The character experienced an extreme disappointment at the beginning and even some throughout the series. And we saw him, I'm going to mention this again, we saw him fall back in love with Cassidy Yates. And we saw him go through very, very human circumstances, like having to, or pondering taking the relationship to the next level. And then I'm thinking in that one episode, getting into a fight with Cassidy because he was a little unsure about her moving to the station, I think it was, and taking the relationship to the next level. That's something we all go through here in this real world. So that was masterful, the way that they portrayed that. His friendship with Calvin Hudson, when Calvin Hudson joined the Maquis. It was a three-dimensional character on a journey with positive attributes and negative attributes and real human feelings and going through real human situations, such as with his father when they were looking for the changeling. His father made an appearance on the show, and we got to see Captain Sisko, the son, dealing with an elderly, ornery father back in New Orleans on Earth. So there was just a lot there that made a really, really seasoned character. His pa will follow another path. So I'm going to wrap this up here. I don't want this to go too long. I hope the final cut of this video isn't too long and that I haven't lost my viewers here. But I thought of this character when I thought about the portrayal of diverse characters. And right now, there's a real push for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't see anything wrong with that. But I think, once again, it goes back to telling good stories and not shoehorning people and demographics in there just for the sake of putting them in there. And also, I think the wrong thing to do is to completely remove and to completely diminish beloved characters who we've known for a while just for the sake of replacing them. If you're going to use diverse characters, if you're going to go for diversity, equity, and inclusion, use the example of what the writers of Star Trek Deep Space Nine did. Create something unique. Create a unique journey. Create a unique character. Create a unique story. Create something unique. Don't just shoehorn characters in and diminish characters that we already know and like and love. And that's what aside from the things that I described in this video, that's what the Ben Sisko character represents for me. And this will always be one of my favorite characters. And it's in large part because of how Avery Brooks portrayed this character and how the writers wrote the character and wrote the story. That's why I have all 7 series. I'm sorry. That's why I have all 7 seasons back there in my library. I have all 7 seasons of Star Trek Deep Space Nine because I started watching in the middle as an undergraduate. And so at some point I wanted to go back and watch it from the beginning. So I knew every episode and every story and every backstory. So yeah, I'm a fan of that series. That's my favorite Star Trek TV series. I'm yet to watch Voyager. That I have a disclaimer there. I have yet to watch Voyager. I've seen pieces of it. Maybe one day I'll sit down and watch Voyager from front to back in the same way I did Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I was on a mission with the Jem'Hadar once. They were good, tough, professional. It was an honor to serve with them. But that Vorta, he was different, manipulative, treacherous, trusted by neither side. In the end, he was killed by the Jem'Hadar first. Surprised? All right, everyone. I was going to go over some of my favorite episodes. I wrote down in the pale moonlight when they're trying to get the Romulans to join their side against the Dominion. I wrote down the one where I can't think of the title, when they the Dominion brings down the replicating minds that Rom created, and then the Defiant goes into the wormhole, and Captain Sisko convinces the Prophets to destroy all of the Dominion ships that were coming through, and they in turn defeat the Dominion forces that are on the Alpha Quadrant side. I wrote that down. There are just so many. The Clarence Williams episode where we first meet Wayun. There are just so many episodes involving Captain Sisko. But I'm going to wrap this up here. But once again, I'm going to hammer this for the last time in this video, and I've intentionally been hammering this. The Captain Sisko character was not designed to replace Captain Kirk or Captain Picard. He was designed to be his own unique character and to go on his own unique journey. And I think that the producers and the writers of the show, they achieved that. And the persons who casted Avery Brooks, they all collectively achieved that. So I'm going to give you all a digital applause here. So Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Warner Brothers, Netflix, take notes. This has been done before, and it's been done well. This is Big Discussions 76, Entertainment and Media. My name is not the emissary. It's Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar. If you're new to the channel, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to donate something to the channel, that information is below in the description box. And also, please consider joining the Big Words LLC Newsletter. In addition to being a YouTube content creator, I'm also a writer with 2 blogs and a book project on the way, which I will be discussing on the channel at some point. So with that, everyone, thank you for watching. Again, if you're new, if you're part of the Star Trek crowd and you came here, please consider subscribing. I plan to do more Star Trek content. This is not the only new t-shirt that I have. I have others. So please consider subscribing. And with that, everyone, as always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Always try to do your best. Take care, and I will talk to you the next time. Bye-bye. At 0800 hours station time, the Romulan Empire formally declared war against the Dominion. They've already struck 15 bases along the Cardassian border. So, this is a huge victory for the good guys. This may even be the turning point for the entire war. There is even a welcome to the fight party tonight in the war room. So, I lied. I cheated. I bribed men to cover the crimes of other men. I am an accessory to murder. But the most damning thing of all, I think I can live with it. And if I had to do it all over again, I would. Garrick was right about one thing. A guilty conscience is a small price to pay for the safety of the Alpha Quadrant. So I will learn to live with it because I can live with it. I can live with it. Computer, erase that entire personal log.